like this unit. And I've always liked this unit. This is what my degree is actually in, wildlife ecology and conservation. So I think it's a lot of fun because it is more broad picture. So far we've focused on a lot of tiny things, like very specific things. And this takes a broader view of a big kind of picture thing. Looking at how animals and plants interact. That's what ecology is. Animals, plants interacting, how things play off of each other, how animals interact with their environment, how the plants interact with the animals, and things like that. That's what ecology is. So I've always enjoyed in the whole unit in general, and I have a lot of fun with this. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't pull up the new thing. Oh, we still got genetics up here. I still have spring break break. That'd be fun. All the time. We don't want genetics.
No, you guys.
Oh.
She says, I hope they watch this.
Ecology. Here it is. Don't worry, I've got it.
Oh, she's looking.
Now we're good.
Oh, yeah, she is.
I'm super organized like that.
Yeah.
Here we go.
That's all I got.
Alright, ecology. Ecology is the branch of biology that deals with the relations of organisms to one another and to their physical surroundings. So this deals with biotic, which is living things, and abiotic, which is non-living things. The interaction of living things and non-living things. So how the two interact with each other. So it's not just how a bird gets along with another bird. It's how does that bird interact with a tree? And yes, the tree is living, but how does that bird interact with the soil? Or how does that soil interact with a plant? And how does that plant interact with the rocks that are around it? Everything. How does the entire ecosystem relate to each other? The interconnectedness of it all. So there's also something called population ecology. And this is the study of how populations interact. It could be populations of people, but it could just as easily be populations of plants. A population, if you think of way back at the beginning of biology, we learned like individual and then population and then community, and there's these different levels of organization. Well, population is a group of organisms that are the same species, okay? So we are a population of humans. And then there's a population of grass, as long as they're the same kind of grass. So it's the same type of species. So looking at population ecology, it's studying the same kind of thing, okay? So studying population ecology often involves the use of demographics. Demographics is looking at statistics within a population. So demographics is looking at how many, like if we're looking at people, for instance, how many males and females are in in Harrisburg? How many people of this age are in Harrisburg? Those are demographic kind of things. And these, of course, are going to change over time. I mean, it's not the same year to year. One grade level may have more males and females. One grade level may have more, more people in sports than another level. Those are all types of demographics. Guys are all so quiet, so studious. You know, somebody told me we only have 29 days left of school.
Yes.
That caused me to panic. I have so much more to teach you. I can't fit it all in 29 days.
But what happened if you like couldn't fit it all?
For you guys, I'm not too worried. Ecology is the main thing. It's mostly my physiology I'm worried about. Because physiology, I need to get through all the systems. And I don't know if I'm going to get through all the systems. It's mostly physiology. For you guys, if we get through ecology, we're mostly good. Body systems, I may have to rush that a little bit so we can dissect the pig. But if we have to rush it,
We can skip that part. It's okay.
I enjoy
What?
bacon, and I would like it to say that.
we're gonna dissect the pig. What is with all you party poopers?
I'll do it.
What day are we gonna do that? 'Cause I might
Toward the end of the year.
I might be sick.
Okay, what if I didn't have
Oh my
smell it?
goodness, you guys.
Yeah, it's not just the smell. It's not smell.
Coyote
should be like,
the rest of it will
let's
be
go.
fine.
We are dissecting a pig,
I
and
don't
you are
think
going
it's
to
smart.
participate, and you may like it more than you realize.
I don't care about the smell. It's just it looks gross.
No, it's the smell. I don't
Pigs
care
are a
about
pretty
it.
clean dissection.
Well, I can't even smell.
Like formaldehyde.
Oops, I went too far. Oh wait, we need to wait. Are we good?
Which
Okay.
one?
All right, populations, a group of organisms that interbreed with one another more often than they interbreed with other members of their species. So we are a population in Harrisburg. That is a population. There's a population in Boonville. Here's a population in Columbia. When you drive in to Harrisburg, it says population. How many people do we have here? Population.
Like 2 something.
There you go. That's our population. Population size is the total number of individuals in that area. And then population density is the number of individuals per unit area or volume. So population size and density are not necessarily the same thing.
Stop.
So population distribution describes how individuals are distributed. There's different ways that they can be distributed. Clumped is one of them, and clumped is actually the most common. I mean, think about us, for instance. The human population typically lives in cities, right? So we tend to congregate in areas because we're a social people. We're gonna live in groups, so we have a clumped distribution. And think about animals in general. Animals are usually gonna live in groups. Fish live in schools of fish because they are more protected in a large group. Herds of deer, herds of cattle, and large groupings of animals are pretty common. Large flocks of birds. But not all animals are going to live in groups. I mean, my spiders each like to live individually. So some animals don't live in groups. So there are different distributions, but clumped distribution is the most common one that you're going to find in nature. All right, this is an example of how we, as humans, live in clumps. The population of the United States is easily discernible as clumped. We are very sparsely populated in this area because this is a lot of desert area and there's a lot of mountains here. But California has a very high population, and a lot of these eastern states, Florida and into the New York area, and then also into Texas, there's a lot of clumped distribution. So these purpley areas have really, really high distribution. So these are a lot of these larger cities that we're seeing have a clustered grouping. So again, clumped distribution is extremely common. So here's St. Louis and Kansas City. That's pretty obvious too. Two very large areas that have high distribution. Now there's other types of distribution patterns which are near uniform and then random distribution. Near uniform is individuals are evenly spaced than would be expected by chance. Random is by chance. It's just randomly, like you take a thing of seeds and you throw them out there, that's random. But near uniform or uniform is, it's very unique and very precise. This isn't very common, actually. The uniform distribution is actually quite rare. You don't see it very often. Now you do sometimes. For this one, imagine you're driving down the highway and you see birds on a telephone wire and the birds are very evenly spaced. That would be kind of a uniform distribution pattern. You're gonna see this in bird colonies that are breeding, and the birds are kind of spaced out on the ground and they each have a certain distance away from other birds. That is going to be an example of near uniform distribution. Random distribution is a little more common, not as common as clumped though. With this one, individuals are randomly distributed Imagine again dandelions. Dandelions, the seeds just poof and they float around in a field and then they land wherever and they grow. So that's random. You could have a cluster in one area, you could have them very spread out in another. It's just wherever they landed, and dandelions are just really good at growing. So random distribution is just wherever they happen to fall. And remember, again, these patterns apply to plants just as much as they apply to animals. Trees are going to exhibit distribution patterns also. Larger trees are going to need certain spacing because they can, once their branches get really big, they're going to fight for sunlight. So they kind of thin themselves out a certain way because they can't be clustered together, otherwise they're not going to get the sunlight that they need. So the certain trees are going to die off, and the spacing is going to be a little more uniform for the larger trees. This is in Google Classroom, and it shows the different types of patterns we just talked about. So here's clumped distribution. They're all in these different clumps. You can kind of see them clumped here. This is uniform distribution. Again, it is a more rare situation, but it does happen. And this is random. It's completely random. You can have a little clumped, a little spaced out there. So sampling, biologists frequently use sampling techniques to estimate population size. It's not practical to go out and count every single thing in a field or every single tree in a forest. It's not practical. You could, potentially you could, but it would take forever and it's a waste of time. But there are methods and techniques you can use instead that will give you a pretty good estimate that's pretty accurate, that you can use to guess the amount of whatever you want to know in the field or in the population, and get a good number of what's out there, and instead of counting every single individual thing. So there's something called plot quadrant sampling. My conservation biology class is going to be doing this in a little bit. We've had to wait for some things to grow, so we haven't gotten to this quite yet. But plot quadrant sampling is a method that is used in a field typically for plants that are growing. These plants need to not be able, or objects, it doesn't necessarily have to be plants, but plants are usually what works best. The thing you're sampling needs to not be able to move very much. And the conditions across the area they occupy are more or less uniform. So plants really work best. So if you have a large field, then sampling a field and sampling for a particular kind of plant is really a great way to do the plot quadrant sampling. So now that things are starting to grow, my conservation class is going to do this method. So there's also what's called a mark and recapture method. This is much better for looking at a population that moves. So first of all, I thought it did a better explanation of the plot quadrant. The way you do a plot quadrant is you mark off a field into like squares, and then you will randomly select squares, and then you'll count what's in that square. And then you do a little math equation to figure it out. So that's what they're doing here is the plot quadrant. They've marked off the field and they're counting what's in this square. For my group, we're gonna do hula hoops because hula hoops are easy to measure the area of, and you lay the hula hoop down and you'll count whatever's inside the hula hoop. So in this case, they laid down this area and they're counting the plants that are in that area. Now, mark recapture is a way that you can determine an animal, and this is good for organisms that move. So usually small things, and I mean, you could do larger things, but smaller animals are what works best for this. Monarchs, turtles, I mean, you can do deer, but it's best in an area that the animals aren't going to travel away and migrate super far, that they're going to stay in that one area. So what you do is you mark them in some way, and then they are going to, you're going to release them. And then after a couple days, you allow them to mingle back within the population, and then you capture them again, which is why it's called mark and recapture. I mean, that's what the name is. You mark them, then you capture them again. Mark and recapture. So once you mark them and you recapture them, then you use a little math equation to see how many of them are new or how many of them have the mark on them that you've captured before. So how many have you captured before and how many of them are new? So here's the first sample, okay? This is the first sample we caught, and these are all ones we caught the first time, so we painted their shell red. And then this is, we released all these, they went back, they mingled in the population, and so then after a couple days, we caught some more. And of the second batch, we had 5 that had painted shells. So 5 of these we caught before, the rest of these were all new. So we can put those numbers into an equation, and then we can figure out the population size. So that's a good technique that can be used for live animals that move around, is the mark recapture method. The trick with this one though, is you can't do something that hurts the animal, because then it'll make them scared to go in the trap. If you're injuring the animal, then they're like, oh, I'm not going in that trap again because last time I got hurt, so I'm not going in that. Also, you can't do something that will cause the animal to get killed, because if you really painted, well, painting a turtle wasn't too bad, but if you had a rabbit and you painted the rabbit bright orange, well, now all the predators are going to see it. So it's going to get eaten. So you can't do something that's going to cause the animal to not survive.
I've seen where people like paint the turtle with nail polish and it comes back every year. Is that what the chemicals hurt them?
It would be better to use like a safe nail polish instead of one that. Yeah, it would be better to use a safe nail polish. So other ways to do population counts, you can tag the individual. Take zoology, and we do a monarch count. Although last year we found 1 monarch. The year before we didn't find any monarchs. But we do try to do a monarch count. There's also, this is called a line intersect method. If you're doing something like a forest or with shrubs that you can't really lay a hula hoop on top of it, you mark a line down and then you walk that line, and whatever lies across that line, that's what you count. So like if we're counting this little kind of fanny bush here, we would count, okay, this is 1 here and this is 1 here. So you count whatever is within like 3 feet on either side of this line. So that's the line intersect method. So there's different ways that scientists have come up with to mark and sample populations. You can also radio tag animals. All right. Immigration and immigration. This is another one of those, why did they name it the same thing? I mean, it's kind of the same thing. It sounds the same, but the words look different. But this one you can remember because immigration with an I means going into the population. Immigration with an E means it's exiting the population. So that's not too bad. Immigration with an I means an animal or plant is coming into a population and the population increases. Immigration with an E means that the organism, whatever it is going out of the population or exiting, think exiting the population. So the population is getting smaller. If there is like an equal, then the population has zero growth. So we're looking at population change with this. Can the population grow or the population get smaller? And there are several things that cause this to happen. Births, if the population is having birth, if the population is having deaths, if the population is having immigration with an I or immigration with an E. These are all things that are going to cause a population to change in size. Births, deaths, immigration, or immigration. I should just start pronouncing it immigration or immigration. Immigration, immigration. That way you guys know the difference. So this little picture here, you got some, what is that, a duck? It's like a duck. Some brown and some white ducks. And this white duck has decided it's gonna come over here. So on this one, it's immigration with an E, because it's leaving, it's exiting. And on this one, it's coming into this one, this population. So in this one, it's entering into. So this is immigration with an I. This is immigration with an E. All right, look, we're done with notes. So there's a new assignment, which I'll post in just a moment. It is kind of an interactive. I mean, it's a little complicated, but I know you can handle it. I like it because it's based on real life data. It's talking about African wildlife case studies based on real life data and real life maps of African wildlife, and using information that has been gathered and having you draw conclusions from it. So it's making you think like a real scientist. So that's why I like this assignment. It's really making you use your critical thinking skills and using information that scientists have gathered from Africa to see how you can apply your knowledge of what you've learned and test out your ecological and ecologist skills. So let me either stop the recording and